Gaelic football on Off the Ball.
With AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. Check out #TheToughest for more.
So this weekend it is Dublin against Meath in the Leinster Senior Football Championship semi-final. Remarkably, it will be the 53rd game that Dublin have played in the Leinster Championship since 2005, and in all that time they have only lost one of them, back in 2010 when Meath rode into Croke Park and battered the Dubs by 5-9 to 13 points. Delighted to be joined on the line by Anthony Moyles and Nigel Crawford to reminisce about the good old days, Anthony. We won't mention what happened in the decade since or the decade before.
The good old days, Nathan. Yeah. I can hardly remember. What I had for breakfast. So this is a bit of a stretch, to be honest. But the good old days. Yeah, that was one good day.
That was a very good day. Any day you score 5 goals against the Dubs is one you're always going to remember. Give us the context from a Meath point of view. And listen, we all talk about the rivalry, but the Dubs at that stage had already become utterly dominant in Leinster. They were still a year away from becoming utterly dominant over the rest of the country. Was there a sense by then, by 2010, that this Dublin side are well ahead of us, that it's a massive shock for Meath to go to Croke Park and beat Dublin?
I don't think so. To be fair, we were kind of playing. We were going well in the previous couple of years. 2007 and 2009. Obviously, we got to All Ireland semi-finals. 2008 was a bit of a blip, shall we say. But we would have felt that the team was on an upward trajectory. Younger lads who had come in had blended in well with some of the older crew. We were fairly potent up front. And we had a number of players who could, kind of hurt you on their day. We got a little bit of consistency, I suppose. The madness that was going on, I suppose, and the different various changes of the guard over the years, and kind of the fallout after Sean had left, that had kind of managed to, I suppose, wither away. And, as a group, we had kind of matured. A lot of the kind of fellas who had, kind of been there for the previous number of years had taken kind of, not a whole of things, but I suppose they kind of realised that actually, hold on a second, we've got a decent squad here and we've got a decent group of players and we can probably really start to up it. And then we got good buy-in from some of the younger lads. There was a kind of a blend of fellas who had won an All-Ireland, who would come in, like Joe Sheridan and a few of the fellas like Joe. So there was a nice mix, and we were coming. Eamon O'Brien had obviously, assumed the role with a good, very, very good, solid backroom team who believed in us, and who kind of instilled the belief in us from the 2007 and the 2009 kind of tenure. So there would have been great belief in the squad, Nathan, and we would have always kind of said even the battles prior to that against Dublin were relatively close. We'd brought them to, I think, a replay in a couple of years before, and we got beaten in the replay, but the game was in the mixer right till the death. So there wasn't that, I suppose, maybe inferiority complex. Certainly not at that stage. So it wasn't a surprise. Maybe just the result was the surprise, as in the 5 goals and the measure, the margin of the result. But as regards being a competitive fixture, I think we would have felt that we can go in and give it a really good rattle.
But they were a different animal back then. That wasn't the same Dublin team that came out then years after that. That was a team that had lost a lot themselves.
Well, that was a year after the Startled Earwigs game.
Yeah, like that wasn't an amazing Dublin team at all. And if anything, it was the game that we played against them and put those 5 goals against them that helped them make those tough decisions on certain players and bring in the new crop that then went on to become the great teams. So there was no aura about that Dublin team, which they then brought in future years. So to Anthony's point, I don't think we were in any way, even though we had lost a good few times to them, there was no inferiority complex that I think then did develop over the following decade.
Nigel, it was still a team that had Cluxton in goal, Philly McMahon, Rory O'Carroll, Brian Cullen, Ger Brennan, Paul Flynn, the Brogans, Mossy Quinn. It was still a team that was the backbone of a side that 14 months later went on to win All-Ireland.
It was, yeah, but I don't want to get personal here, but they also had some other guys in that team who probably weren't good enough to win All-Irelands either. And And yeah, we just didn't. And plus also some of those players, probably Paul Flynn was one, and the Alan Brogan were probably really established as top class players at that stage. But a lot of the others weren't. They were only really coming into their own and developing, and there were younger guys who hadn't really developed into the top class players that they did become. I think even Cluxton as well developed his game after that a bit more. He was a hugely influential player even back then, but I think he got better as well, as did a lot of them. So I would say yes, when you look back at the names, they were great names, but back then there was probably only a few of those that I would say were truly top class footballers at that time. Now a load of them went on to become legends in Dublin and nationally, like really brilliant players, some of the best of all time. But yeah, it was a strange one. It was very much a team that was coming, but certainly wasn't there in my view at that time.
Anthony, you mentioned Eamon O'Brien as manager and there was Bob O'Malley as selector. The preparation that they put into that season to bringing you to another level after getting to All-Ireland semi-finals. I was reading Mickey Burke in The Game of My Life on Meath footballers, which I know you contributed to as well, talking about greatest games. And he spoke about a training camp in Portugal at the start of the season. How often we think of these training camps, there might be a nice couple of drinks at the bar in the evening. He said it was absolutely horrendous, pushed to the limits all the time in the heat. On the first day of camp, Brian Sheridan pulled his hamstring, but he didn't get to rest. Bob had him crawling the length of the field. His forearms and his thighs were on fire. The sun splitting the stones. We were looking over at Bob, urging Brian to keep going. It was relentless. It was so tough. All you could hear was Bob shouting, "Come on." He was like a drill sergeant. An enjoyable trip for everybody?
Yeah. Probably the worst thing to do was to get injured during that trip, because you were sent over to Bob's special camp, which wasn't a nice place to be at all, Nathan. But no, these trips, they can be good or they can be, terrible. It all depends on obviously what happens, post the trip. People will look back at it and say, oh, that speech or that trip or that bus journey was, that was the turning point. The guys had themselves obviously well organised. We went out there, we needed it. But we were coming as a group and as a team, as I said, the belief was already there. Some lads would have been very fearful of Bob. Bob was a very, very strong kind of personality in the sense, no messing. But he gave great belief and he gave great confidence to fellas. And if you did it, he was no problem in telling you. And I think that squad suffered, and I think Nigel would back me up on this. There was a bit of, I think there was a little bit of doubt amongst that squad, because for a long number of years post the Sean era, a lot of players were being kind of, nearly kind of ridiculed and ridiculed by former Meath players of the 80s and the 90s teams of, oh, well, they're not good enough and they're not this and they're not that. And there was always this constant kind of analysis and treatment of, well, where do they rank and where does this current crop of players rank, and are they tough enough, or are they this and are they that? And what people didn't realise, I think, or maybe they did, they just didn't want to admit it, was that there was a change going on within the game and in preparation. And, Dublin had grasped that, and disregarding this particular result, there was changes going on at the Dublin club level and at the Dublin County Board level, which was already setting the stepping stones for what came after it. Like Meath, as I said, where it was kind of, it was getting fewer and far between where they were really battling at minor and under 21 level. Whereas Dublin were starting to get much more consistent with their winning. So the crop of players was coming through. And look, we know we're still obviously seeing the fact that Dublin are reaping the rewards of that, whereas Meath and Kildare are still only playing catch up. With regard to these competing, not are competing, but it still takes 5-10 years to get to the level where you have to be at senior level. So, it was probably in hindsight, when you look back on it as a Meath supporter and a Meath fan, that team of kind of 07, 08, 09 and 10 was probably as strong a team that had been there for, maybe 10 years since the 2000 or 99 and 01 team. And certainly probably the 7 or 8 or 10 years maybe since. A very, very good, talented crop of players who are very committed, strong, wanted to compete, weren't afraid of anyone really, and it was we were just being primed and ready for that. And to be fair to Eamon and Bob, they gave us the belief of that. They weren't naysayers. They weren't people who decided that actually you're not good enough. You have to kind of commit. They actually gave us the belief, and it was a terrible finish to obviously Eamon's tenure with what happened. And that was just another chapter in the Meath story of the last 15 or 20 years. And unfortunately, with how things transpired after the Leinster final and Eamon and Bob and the lads not getting the chance to come in the following year, that really put Meath back when all of a sudden we were taking a step forward. It put us back probably 3 or 4 years.
Nigel, what's your memory of the build-up then to that season and that semi-final? And there was a big score racked up against Offaly. I think first day out against Laois could well have ended up being beaten. There was a mistake by the Laois keeper, lets you back in, win the replay. So in terms of that season and the build-up and the confidence levels within the group, I know you had a bit of a problem with an injury at that stage. Was there a real sense from your memory of that day going to Croke Park of, yes, we're in a really strong place right now and there's still a flakiness around these Dublin players that we can get at?
Yep, I think so. Personally, so I ruptured a disc in my back just after that Offaly game, and I missed the 2 Laois games. And I remember for myself, I was sitting up there and I came on just after half time in the Dublin game, and I shouldn't have been coming on. I wasn't fit to come on. I remember when they looked up at me, I was like, please don't call on me to come on. And I made the slow trek down. But as a team, I do think you're right there. We did go into that game pretty confident. We had gone through 3 good games in that. We beat Offaly well, we played well. We had a good tough game or 2 against Laois, and getting that bit of momentum is good for us. Meath in the past have gone well when they go on those type of runs and build up a bit of momentum. So I think going into it, we were in a good place. Memory of the game, it was a beautiful warm day, one of those great days to play in Croke Park. The sun is shining, there's a good big crowd there with Meath and Dublin. And a real just excitement and energy around the place. So I think we were in a good place going into it, very much looking forward to it. And one thing we had, and Anthony alluded to this, we mightn't have been having huge success, but we had been to 2 All-Ireland semi-finals in the previous 3 years. We had some really top-class forwards and fellas who could score. And really then it was down to people like me and Anthony and Seamus Kenny and fellas who've been around a while, who are good at just getting on the ball and getting it into them as quick as we could and letting them do damage. Like Stephen Bray at the time was probably one of the best forwards in the country. You had Joe on his day, Joe Sheridan, who could do just unbelievable things. He could do unbelievably bad things as well. We joke with Joe about that. But incredible talent and a real danger all times. And then Keane Ward was another one who would be able to get scores, kick frees. I think Brian Farrell, I don't even know if he started that day, was another guy who was really capable of getting scores. And I think Graham Riley was just starting off his career. So, you look at that, you had 4 or 5 forwards there who on their day could put up massive scores. So we had confidence with players like that there. We know we could get scores, and then some other experienced kind of grafters who were working hard out the field and had, that work ethic and toughness that you alluded to there with Bob O'Malley bringing to the team. We were in a relatively good place and probably felt, we don't feel overawed by Dublin, because at that stage, really, they'd won Leinster's. They hadn't really proven anything on a national stage. So, a good place going into an exciting game.
I think you were wearing the number 5 jersey, Anthony. Where were you playing?
I was playing right half back, actually.
So were you up against Flynn?
No, I was actually marking Niall Corkery, who had played for Kilmacud Crokes. I think Kilmacud Crokes, if I'm not wrong, had won the All-Ireland club that year, and he was playing midfield. I think he went travelling after that year because he was a lad.
Player. Like any other county, to lose a player like that, he was a very good player. Yeah,
and I think Dublin had, to be fair to the lads again, Robbie and Eamon O'Brien, and I think Donald Curtis was involved as well, Nigel, was I think at the time, on the backroom team. They had done their homework. They put Gary O'Brien. Gary O'Brien was a lad, Navan O'Mahony's player, who had unbelievable engine, like a guy who could just go all day, very sticky fella. cornerback, halfback, and he went on to Alan Brogan and just did a job on Alan, just followed him around as much as you could for Alan. But we realised that obviously Alan was a quarterback type player for Dublin at the time. Niall McKay took Mossy Quinn, so you wouldn't have a worry with Niall, to be fair. He was just that kind of really horrible cornerback that you don't want to come up against. Kevin Riley was in the full back line, and Owen Harrington. So it was a solid enough full back line. Then there was myself. I think, I can't remember. Gary O'Brien was in there, I think, at centre back. And I'm not sure who was the far side. But Shane O'Rourke was obviously one that Nigel missed. He was on Rory O'Carroll, in our full forward. And Shane was playing absolutely, like, he was imperious that year. He was just doing what he wanted with the football. Like a big man, 6'4", well able to shift, kick off left and right. And if you watch the game back, like some of the scores, both from Dublin and Meath, were top notch. I was playing halfback, and the specific idea there, Nathan, was Dublin kicked a lot of kickouts towards Corkery. And he won a massive amount of kickouts in games previous to that. So the idea was that I would basically just use my depth skills at mauling the living daylights out of him.
I thought it was your incredible pace. You were the modern wing back.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, I forgot that part of it, but the mauling I could do. I could tick that box absolutely. Yeah. But no, so that was the plan. But it was a funny game because it like Nigel said, it was unbelievable. It was very fast, very pacey. Like both teams were evenly matched in the first half, and there was really nothing in it. And even after we got, I think, a goal. Or maybe two, I'm not sure, but Paul Flynn came down and rattled one off the post and really should have scored. And I think that would have put Dublin back to only being a point behind or something like that. And it was literally just as that ball came back out, we went down the far end and we got another goal. And then just before you knew it, we were like 7 or 8 points up or something like that, and kind of the game was over.
There seemed to be a sense afterwards, Nigel, that the Dubs maybe underestimated the pace that was in that Meath side, that there was a perception that the Meath forward line was quite a one-paced forward line, but that the game plan was run at these Dublin players, that they're going to push up on you, run at them, and we'll have the beating of them.
And the other thing I'd say as well is, Nathan, we used to always play direct ball as well. We were trying to get it in as quickly as possible because we knew if we could get it in there, those lads did have the pace, as you said, and weren't afraid to take a man on. That was a great thing about that forward line. And I did forget about Shane. Shane O'Rourke was the type of fellow, a huge man, but actually had the skills of a much smaller man. So he had a great balance in there. But all of them were keen to take their men on. And really, for lads like me and Anthony, all we were doing was trying to win the ball and just kick it into them as quickly as possible and let them do it. And Dublin didn't play a sweeper, I think, at the time, and hadn't gone defensive and kind of played the man-on-man game. So I think we felt with those forwards, we had a great chance if we could win our fair share of ball out the field, get our tactics, somewhat right, and then just quickly get the ball into the lads and let them take them on. And on a dry, warm day in Croke Park, good, talented footballers like that in our forward line who are willing to take their men on, they'll always do well in that, particularly without the sweeper. And I think it was probably after that game that Dublin did revert to a much tighter game. I think Keane O'Sullivan probably started, shortly after that game coming in and playing that sweeper role, and Dublin did bring more men back and just get a bit more disciplined about how they played as well. So I think we're probably at fault for creating a monster in a way, but yeah, certainly on the day we felt that with that quick ball into those forwards we could have the beating of them.
We've spoken so much over the years, Anthony, that like the Dubs, it felt like taking on a machine at times when they were playing under Jim Gavin. I don't know what you remember about on the pitch in those closing minutes, and I know they took you off for a rest to save you for the Leinster final with a few minutes to go, but when you looked in the eyes of those Dublin players and they're getting one hell of a beating on home soil, as they had done the year before as well against Tyrone, what was your sense of their character, their personalities at that stage when things really weren't going well for them?
It's hard to know, Nathan. It really is. I remember there was probably a time where we had been on the receiving end of obviously some beatings from Dublin, and numerous beating since 2001. So it was absolutely sweet. The crowd were, enjoying every single minute of it. And there's that horrible feeling in a game where no matter if you're 2 or 3 or 4 up or even 5 up, you're never quite settled. You're never quite relaxed. You still have that kind of tension in your body and tension in your stomach. So you're still driving on. You're just never quite so sure. But I remember actually at that time, I think I looked over at Nigel at one stage, and I just kind of, there was that feeling like, okay, this is done. They're not coming back from this, because there was a kind of, I think, a collective thing where they basically just looked around and kind of said, what just happened here? It was obviously so startled and such a seismic move for them that obviously what has been born out of that was Gilroy obviously deciding that, okay, now I have this, I'm going to rip up the copybook and I now have a clean bill of health. And Nigel alluded to certain players being kind of axed. And I think that was Gilroy's opportunity to probably go into the Dublin County Board and just say, listen, there's 5 or 6 here who, have been involved, and I want to move them on, and I want to move on how we're going to play, and this is how we're going to, and obviously then subsequently follow the different players and the different managers who took on. But was there a sense when we were walking off the pitch that, this was the tide that was going to turn? No, not at all. But at the same time, fair play to Gilroy and fair play to the people involved that they actually looked at it and didn't go, this is all wrong. But they did go, okay, things need to change. And a lot of times county boards and everything else will make kind of, I suppose, drastic changes with regard to the management. No one looked at Gilroy's head, if I remember correctly. People kind of said, right, it was in him, they trusted, and they said, right, well, we just have to go back to the drawing board and we have to alter how we play. Because again, it was 5-9 to 13. It was 14 scores to 13 scores. So it wasn't like we beat them, 22 scores to 10 type thing, and we were absolutely all over them. Yes, the goals made a big difference, but there wasn't an enormous amount of stuff that he had to change because he was blooding those younger players anyway. And it was, I'd say it was humbling for them, and it was something that they stuck, down and remembered, because they certainly didn't appreciate it, and they haven't looked back since.
No, certainly not. So, from a Meath point of view, you go through to a Leinster final against Louth. Quite enough affair, Nigel?
Yeah, not much went down. One that people will forget. We were, that was that final. So we should have hammered Louth in that game. I think we were a good bit a better team than them, but we didn't play well. And we kept them in the game. And then all of a sudden, the last couple of minutes, we're finding ourselves a couple of points down, or a point down, and really, desperate at that stage. We always flag Seamus Kenny because he had the ball right in front of the goals and still managed to kick it into the backside of a Louth player. So really, Seamus should have scored, and then there'd be none of this talk about what happened after that. Ball break.
Really.
Yeah, blame Seamus. And then ball broke to Joe, and then we all know what happened after that.
Where does that go in the Joe Sheridan ranking of really good things, really bad things?
Oh, it's no surprise it was Joe that it happened to. If it was anyone in the Meath team, it would be Joe. So, no, I'm very fond of Joe. He was a great teammate and I loved playing with him. So it was great that it was Joe that it happened to, because I suppose it just builds into the legend of Joe Sheridan in Meath football. So it was, it was a crazy final. But you know what? I've spoken about that final more than any other game in my career, and I played for, I think, 13 years with Meath and was lucky enough to win an All-Ireland. It's the one game that people always want to talk about. Now, obviously, I feel for Louth and the Louth players that they were on the wrong side of that. But, it was a very memorable game and one that people always enjoy talking about.
Just to wrap up on Leinster, Anthony, the sense since is that because Meath really felt they should have been miles ahead of Louth at that stage, that the players would have happily given a replay, because you sense that if there was a replay, you would have had more than enough to go and win it. You just were never asked.
Yeah, well, it was. like I think I spoke to you probably before on this, Nathan, but no problem. Like the Louth team are a very, very good team. Nigel obviously is living in Dublin now, so he doesn't have to worry about going in and out of Louth ever. So he can castigate them up there.
I just had plenty to say about the Dubs.
Yeah. No, they were a really talented team. They deserved to be in the Leinster final. I do think we played very poorly that day. It was one of those where you were coming off the high of the Dublin match and everyone said, "Oh, well, you blow past Louth and you blah blah blah." So it was all of those different things. We just couldn't get right going that day. We've talked about this. Any of the options as regards offering replays, not offering replays, that should have been completely taken out of the hands of the players, be it Louth players, Meath players, or whoever else. The GAA should have decided themselves, listen, we're not going to cause any situation here with regard to setting any kind of templates or any kind of predetermined stuff. We're just going to literally say this game has to be replayed next week. So it was a horrible feeling. Like, we were downstairs in Croke Park underneath the stand with the cup, something that a lot of fellas hadn't touched, hadn't been near. Nigel and myself were obviously there in 2001, so it was still a long time. And yet we couldn't celebrate. You were sitting there kind of waiting. What's the word? Fellas getting phone calls, management, this is happening, that's happening. People going bananas, obviously, on radio and everything else. Joe Duffy getting involved. Like, if Joe gets involved, something's wrong. So it was just... the thing should have been, obviously, would it have set, I don't know, Nigel would know more about this from a legalistic point of view, but would it have set as something in train that could have been taken on in the various different courts and that? I don't know. But like, certainly the players, we met on the Monday night. We met in Gormanstown. We had a swim in the sea, and then we kind of had a meeting afterwards, sitting outside. I always remember it was a lovely summer's evening, and we're sitting there, and emotions were high. Some fellas had hangovers, some fellas didn't have hangovers, and things were, let's say, getting a little bit emotional. Everyone had their speak, and some fellas were for, some fellas were very much, no, I have my hand on the Leinster medal and I don't want to let it go. Other guys were saying, no, we need to offer something up. But the crux of it was that we said, well, if someone comes and asks us, if the GAA come and say, right, this is it, you're going to have to do this, well, then we play it. And, we'll just go and do it, because that's what we would have to do. So I think it was completely unfair to put it in the camp of ourselves, because there was never going to be 100% agreement either way. And it was that's just the way it was. It was an opportunity that was probably missed by the GAA, and they just got on with it. But it's something, I think, that weighed on us probably, and I don't know if Nigel would agree, but that was a very, very good team. And we went into the Kildare game, played really well in the first half, but ended up getting beaten. And Kildare were within a whisker of winning that All-Ireland, if you remember. They got a pretty bad decision against them, against Down, and then Down went into the All-Ireland final against Cork. That was a very open year, that 2010. There was a lot of teams very, very, at a kind of an even keel. And, people will look back and say, oh, well, Meath deserved to be beat by Kildare. But, there wasn't a whole pile in it. But I think that the stress and the anxiety and the talk had to affect the players, especially some fellas like Joe and different guys who were around the panel. Yeah. And it really would have affected the mindset,
We can't blame Joe now for the Kildare defeat, but as much as we'd like to. But no, it was an emotional time. No, but that said, Kildare were the better team, because I think we started that game and we were 1-3 to no score up at the start. So, we can't blame that. But going back to the point about precedent, and it's the area I work in, I felt very strongly about that. It was very unfair on the Louth players what happened. It was very unfair in my mind, and I'm not looking for any sympathy, that the Meath players were thrown under the bus because we didn't turn around and tell the GAA to give a replay. Imagine any county did that. Let's pick a game from last weekend that we thought was unfairly decided, and the players said, actually, do you know what, let's give a replay. It happens in no other circumstances that the players are allowed to dictate how the game is decided. So it was a nonsense for the GAA to put it on us to do that. And if it did, for me, it would have created this incredibly dangerous precedent where a game was never decided by the referee or at the final whistle, because there was always that chance that the two teams could decide that it was an unfair result and it needs to be replayed. And unfortunately, while it's unfair to the losing team, in sport, that just can't happen. The people who run the game have to make those decisions and make them, and they didn't. And they put it back on us, and we got the pressure from that. But look, it was unfair, not looking for sympathy, but I do think the GAA abdicated their responsibility there and just threw it back on us and let us take the heat, when absolutely it should not have been our decision, and nor should it ever be that the players or management have to decide the outcome of a result or how a replay should be. If that's the case, it would ruin the game.
And Nigel, as Anthony said, 2010 is a year, because of that brilliant weekend, we're down, go and beat Kerry in the All-Ireland quarter-final, that there's 3 or 4 different counties that even still we look back on 2010 and say it's the one that got away, where the championship had completely opened up. Is that how you reflect on the post-Leinster final and Kildare and how the semi-finals and Cork winning it that year? Do you look back and think that was the one year we had a real chance to win All-Ireland?
Yeah, absolutely. But as you said, I think there are a good few teams who probably thought that as well. It's a bit like last year's All-Ireland as well. I'd say there are a few teams out there who felt last year there was a good chance to win one. There was no dominant team there in 2010. There were a couple of good teams, and I would put us in that bracket. Would we have been the favourites? Probably not, but we were thereabouts, and we had been to 2 All-Ireland semi-finals, and we had a good few games under our belt. But that said, look, in the end of the day, we weren't good enough against Kildare, and we were beaten on our merits that day by Kildare. But it was an opportunity looking back at it, because there was no standout team there like Dublin went on to be for years after that as an unbeatable team. And I say last year was a very similar year with Mayo, with Kerry, with Tyrone, with Dublin, teams like that probably all felt, we left that one behind.
So this weekend, Croke Park 4:30 on Sunday, Dublin against Meath. Last year in the Leinster semi-final, obviously it was a slightly different scenario. It was a much less crowd due to the COVID restrictions. Dublin won by 6 points, 216 to 113. Since then, the Dubs have gone into full-scale crisis mode for most of us. I know, Anthony, you've been pushing back on that. Did you see enough from a Dublin point of view, Anthony, in the victory against Wexford? It was described as a no-win game in advance, but did you see enough to suggest that what you have felt throughout the spring, that when the players returned, that they would get back close to their level?
I think I probably did, Nathan. But I think, I can get all cute on it here and blow ahead on Dublin, but I think there's definitely they've got obviously the players back that they need to have back. So O'Callaghan, James McCarthy coming back in, likes of John Small, all of these guys. So they're picking them all back up as they go. Are they as close to the strongest 15 as they possibly could be? I'd say yes, they are. They've unearthed 1 or 2 other fellas throughout the league as well, obviously, who've come in and started. But I don't think they will learn a whole pile from the Wexford game. Wexford were abject, so you're in a situation where you're coming into a Meath team that we've got a good test, by the way, against Wicklow. People will kind of look and say, Wicklow were right in that game for 50 minutes. Does that reflect badly on Meath? But Wicklow have been playing decent football, and whether you do or you don't, at least Wicklow had a good cut at it, where I don't think Wexford really did. I thought Wexford, tried to kind of just defend and see how they went against it, which in the mood that Dublin were in, there was never going to be a win for Wexford, but Dublin just kind of fed on that and completely annihilated them. My feeling is that the Dublin defence still doesn't know exactly where it is. I think there are some players in there who are very, very good players within a system, and the system that has been there for the last number of years. But I think now there's question marks over the way they're playing, their ability to kind of track back and kind of slowly and methodically kind of come out with the ball and then kind of move the ball left and right and go lateral. And they're trying to play this much more quick game, getting the ball in early to their forward line. And they're also kind of saying, well, listen, the responsibility now is you can take a shot if you want. So you fellas, cornerbacks, halfbacks taking shots, which is stuff that you never would have seen under Jim Gavin. Everyone seemed to know the role and stuck within that role. So there's more freedom. There's more responsibility being placed on the players themselves to express themselves. But with that comes probably an area where if you can exploit it. And it's funny, when you think of 2010, well, there was a couple of individual things that just the Meath players won that little battle over the Dublin players, and hence goals came off it. Could that similar thing happen this weekend? You would hope so from a Meath perspective. But, you know, if I was Andy and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the Dublin team, I'm saying that it's a full back line that's relatively small. It's a full back line that's relatively untested. And what we need to do is we need to put pressure straight away on them. Meath will need at least 2 goals. Meath haven't been, you know, kind of setting the world alight either. But again, they were without a lot of very, very big players for themselves throughout the league. Like, there are 2 midfielders missing, their full back missing, their centre half back missing. And they were trying to find a couple of players in the forward line. They have all of those guys back now. So they'll go in as strong as they possibly can go in. And listen, it's a great time to get Dublin, in the sense of, I think if they were to meet Dublin in a Leinster final, they would have already got a good test against either Kildare or Westmeath. So it's the opportunity. I would hope that they can take the same spirit and enthusiasm that they had, and kind of being on the front foot that they had in the second half of last year's game, into this one, because he needs to start. This may potentially be Andy's last year, I don't know, but I would be leaving absolutely nothing on the dressing room wall. You'd be just saying, lads, listen, we're going to go for this, and we're going to go from it for minute 1. We're going to stand out in front, we're going to be brave, and we're going to take the game to them as much as we can, and then see how the cards fall.
Nigel, was a fairly unremarkable league campaign for Meath, and they got the job done against Wicklow. Do they have the tools, when you talk about the players who are coming back, then to ask some sort of different questions of Dublin than they have in recent years? And even what Anthony's touching on there, like, at times the Dubs have kept teams in it till half time. They haven't taken too many risks, and then they just blow them out of the park in the third quarter. There's a sense now that actually if you stuck with them till half time, maybe that third quarter onslaught may not be there from the Dubs.
Yeah, I think it's, well, after last year, it's the first time that you see this kind of vulnerability in Dublin. And sorry, I wouldn't even go as far as saying a vulnerability, but as you said, you don't feel like the inevitability of them slaughtering you towards the end of the game in the third quarter. You just don't feel that's definitely going to happen now. Do Meath have enough? I think the spine of the team looks much stronger now and has a battle-hardened look to it. And fellas who have good experience are big physical players, particularly down the middle, 3, 6, 8, 9, looks strong to me. Looks athletic as well, which is really important against Dublin. I don't know if they have the players. Look, the obvious answer is Dublin have way too much for them, and they've won way too much over the years. But I think Anthony's right, even though he may have been pitching for the Meath job there when he said it might be Andy's last year. But there is a feeling of this is last chance saloon for this crop of players, but a great opportunity for them and a really good chance for them there. They've lost to Dublin for so many years, and eventually they're going to have to beat them. But why not now? If they are going to do it, it has to be with goals. And I think with direct football, you look at some of the league games where Dublin struggled. Thinking back to the Armagh game, it was direct football into Rian O'Neill and taking men on like that, which traditionally has been Meath's strength. So I think if they can win enough ball around midfield, an ominous sign there was Brian Fenton was back to, the greatest midfielder probably who's ever played the game. He's getting back to that status after a quiet league. You would hope now that Meath can contain him and win enough ball and just not let him dominate the game and get on the ball and control it. If they can do that and get their fair share of ball out the field and really just go at the Dublin full-back line, as Anthony said, there's potentially a vulnerability there. Go at them and go for goals and go for broke, because that's the way against Dublin. There's no point in trying to contain them. Meath have done that in the past, and I felt that, not as a criticism of the Meath team, but I felt that they've tried to go out and just contain Dublin and nick it at the end. But we've seen with the talent that they have, they just blow you out of the water. So I would say go toe-to-toe with them, take them on and have a go. And if you go down swinging, really go down and give it a go, so you don't feel like, well, we probably should have given it a go. Go in, no regrets. Go at them and have a go, because you never know. We may look back in 3 or 4 or 5 years' time and say that was the time that Dublin broke, and really it wasn't the end of that great Dublin team. But unless you have a go at them, I don't think we're going to get anywhere.
The goalkeeping factor, Nathan, the goalkeeping factor is a big factor, and we've seen it even last week. We've seen it in most of the matches since, the start of the championship about kickouts. And it's not necessarily, what comes at the end of the kickouts, but teams who decide to give the kickout up or teams who decide to really pressure the kickout. Cluxton is not there, as we know. You've had a situation where they've 2 or 3 goalkeepers now potentially that they've tried through the league. Young Comerford, if he's injured or not, if he's back in, there's an opportunity there where I would imagine Meath will do a full court press as much as they possibly can. And I think Wexford had 7 scores. I don't know how many actual opportunities they had in the fourth. But so in other words, there was no real potential for Wexford to apply pressure on the kick-out. That has to be one of the main things. O'Callaghan back is a big thing for Dublin, but they need to. It's something I've watched it over the last couple of weeks with him. There's a thing with him where he likes to take the ball, and he you can count the amount of steps. He ends up getting a lot of scores where he's running at you and he moves so fast. He's taking 7, 8 steps, then he's playing the ball. Referees seem to be kind of, abject to it or just not seeing it. So the Meath players have to realise that this is happening. And the one thing you can't do with him is you can't put your hand in trying to think that he's going to play, because he's so physically strong. He bounces off you and next thing you're on the floor and it's goal time. So you actually nearly have to just run alongside him. Not expecting them to make the play, and just stay with them and try to keep them up as much as possible and keep yourself up as much as possible. But if they can do that, as Nigel says, there's a great opportunity. There's still massive amount of talent in Dublin, but the grey matter in Dublin, the recent kind of, shall we say, issues that they've had throughout the league are not 6 or 9 or 2 years ago. They're relatively fresh. And they'll say, oh, listen, we got that out of the system and it's all okay now. But if it comes to a battle and if it comes to, a couple of points in it, or maybe even a couple of points behind, it'll be the real time where the leaders have to stand up. And throughout some of those league matches, they necessarily didn't put the hand up. And there's a big difference when you're running on top of the ground like Fenton was, and he's doing whatever he likes against the Wexford team, to that he has to, maybe a couple of points down and he has to win the next ball and he has to stick it over the bar or do whatever. That's the time that you're tested. He's done it in the past, but the real question mark will be over their desire. And when whether it's Meath or whether it's another team this year, when they're in at that moment, have they got the desire and the will to pull it back out again like they did previously? That's the question to be answered.
Emmett Oliver has texted in. He's a Meath man. Anthony Moyles took no prisoners. Had that nasty element you need in your team. To go along with that, Nigel?
Yeah, that means he got sent off a lot and got a lot of yellow cards. No, Anthony, I remember that. Anthony came into the Meath team in 2001. I think it was your first or second start, wasn't Anthony, against Westmeath? And you clip someone with an elbow inside 10 or 15 minutes. And yeah, that was a short game. But no, in fairness, I know I'm having a go at Anthony, but that kind of edge is needed. Maybe not quite as dirty as Anthony was, but just the right side of the line, with a bit of his toughness, and maybe a bit more football thrown in as well.
That's why he was trying to soften up the referee there, I think.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he's made a lot of plays here. Referees, managers, everything this evening.
That's punditry 101 for you right there. That's why he's the king of it. Don't leave us. We've too many pundits coming on here using it as an audition to go get an inter-county job. It's outrageous. Lads, any of you willing to call a Meath win then? We'll clip it up. We'll make you look like heroes on Monday.
I can't hear you, Nathan. You've broken up there, I think, in that last bit. The Zoom. On the Zoomer.
Great stuff. It is Sunday. Are you going to do it, Nigel? You were wavering. No exaggeration. I think I tipped Meath every time they played them between 2011 and 2020. So I think I'll tip Dublin now in the hope that I finally will get it wrong in Meath's favour. But look, it's going to be very tough. It's very tough. And the sensible answer is Dublin will win and will win comfortably. But really hope it's different. All right, Nigel Crawford, Anthony Moyles. Enjoy the game at the weekend.
Cheers, Nathan.
Cheers.
Thanks as always, lads. All our Gaelic football and off the ball is in partnership with AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. You can check out #TheToughest for more.
Gaelic football on Off the Ball.
With AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. Check out #TheToughest for more.